Hi, afternoon, Mike.
Hi, Lana. How are you?
Good, good. And yourself?
Very well, thank you.
Good. Nice to see you. And thanks for joining us today. It's really a privilege to have you on board.
Always my pleasure.
Just to introduce Mike, who's well known in the franchising neck of the woods, Mike is a marketer, public speaker, committed dad, and adrenaline junkie, right, Mike? Refers
That's
to
me.
himself as the waiter who got lucky, who's had 27 years experience in the hospitality industry, including 3 years as the marketing manager of Mug and Bean. He brings his own brand of humor and understands the weird and wonderful world of marketing and franchising. Today, his company works with individuals and companies from all industry segments on branding, strategy, marketing development, franchise development, and customer service. So once again, welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Lana.
And today, really, we're going to be looking at what is happening in the franchise industry, particularly the restaurant industry, post-COVID. And really, what is won out of COVID, what is lost out of COVID, and where you see the resulting pressures that have come from COVID. So to kick off, Mike, maybe you can tell us what pressures we have left behind from COVID and where you see the franchise, the restaurant industry at the moment.
With pleasure, Lana. May I share my screen with you?
Sure.
So there we go. Just if anyone ever needs to get hold of me, those are my contact details. I'll put them up a bit later on. But just briefly, what's happening at the moment is there's been tremendous pressure on restaurants. There have been rising costs, as we know, from petrol to input costs to rentals to staff costs. Just everything is kind of going through the roof. And as a result of those rising costs, we're seeing a real fall in profitability. When I first entered the industry, and I'm talking about 1989, 1990, around about that stage, so it's already maybe 32 years, not even 27. I need to upgrade my own CV. In the last 30 years, profitability has gone from, restaurants talk about retention. How much of your turnover do you actually retain at the end of the day? And highly profitable restaurants were retaining 20 to 24% at that particular time. Now that's dropped down to somewhere between 7 and 11%. So there's massive pressure on restaurant profitability. We're also faced with kind of untrained, almost uncaring staff at the moment. And that's a big part of the fact that, unfortunately, we're not training enough. We really are not training our staff enough. We can talk about that a bit later on. Every time I sit down in front of a franchisee and I said to them, we need to spend some time, effort, and money on training, they always say the same thing to me. They say, what if I go to all that trouble and all that expense and the guys decide to leave? And I always answer with the same thing, which is, well, what if you don't go to that expense and they decide to stay?
Yeah.
That's even worse.
Exactly.
We're putting our most valuable asset, which is actually our customer, in the hands of our least trained, lowest paid, and lowest motivated staff member. And then wondering why we... So that's another pressure. And then, of course, we have this new kind of discerning customer, with the advent of social media and TV programs on cooking and restaurant, what's his name, who does the kitchen, Gordon Ramsay and his kitchen. Everybody believes they're a lot more discerning and have a higher knowledge than they did before. So that's another thing. And every time they're unhappy, they're also then running along to social media to slate you or to give their opinion. And it's often not a very fair one. What I do appreciate is whenever I see a complaint, someone always says, did you speak to the management? And if they didn't, then the people kind of tend to ignore them. And then also there's increased competition, and that's not just from other restaurants. COVID taught everyone that they can cook. People were sharing recipes. They've become a little bit better at that. There's no question that people like Woolworths are after our customers as well. They want to pre-packed meals. I walk into the garage nowadays, the petrol station, and there's a Fit Chef fridge standing there with pre-cooked meals. If I go into Spa, some of my favorite restaurants have their products in the freezers already. So, although I'm buying it at that cost, it means I'm not going to the restaurant. I'm not buying their wine. I'm not having dessert there. So there's a tremendous amount of pressure on restaurants. And by the way, this was all before COVID. That's the best part of it. All of this was happening long before COVID came along. And then all of a sudden, COVID came along, and this added a whole other level of pressure. For example, restricted trading hours, which thank goodness are kind of by the by. There was a ban on alcohol sales, which had a massive impact on the restaurant industry. There were people that just not prepared to go out and sit in a restaurant if they couldn't have alcohol. There was a lot of uncertainty about the future. People weren't sure how much they should invest. And by that, I mean in everything. Should I invest in my marketing? Should I invest in my staff? Should I invest in my property? Should I invest in new cutlery and crockery? Should I invest in research and development? None of that was kind of happening because we were so unsure of where we were. And now we had even more discerning customers, because it's not, and I don't mean that in a bad way, these customers want bang for their buck. Everyone has a limited amount of income at the moment. And when they do spend it, they really want to get a return on it. And when I say return, it means really good food, a wonderful experience, and we can talk a bit about the experience as well. And then along came all these third-party delivery systems. And we know the two big players.
Profitability.
Yeah, they were eating heavily into profitability because, look, there was a time when the only way you could serve your customers was to deliver to them. So you didn't have an option there. In fact, you needed to take the pain in order to at least, be able to do some sales. But these third-party delivery services are very, very expensive to the restaurant industry. It also means that a lot of them have to mark up their prices in order to cover that, which means that people can afford to eat out less. So all of this is having this kind of massive impact. So here we are coming kind of what we hope to the end of COVID. And by that, I'm not talking on the medical terms. I'm talking about the business pressure of COVID. Let's put it that way. Because, if I were to tell you that COVID's over, I'm going to have some doctor phone me, tell me I'm talking rubbish.
Yes, you got us to use it with much discretion.
Yes, I've got to really qualify that what I'm talking about is the pressure of COVID.
100%. The practicality of it.
Yes, it's kind of lifting. No more restrictions, no more ban on alcohol sales. We're all a little bit more certain about the future, and people are coming back. So that kind of gives you the pressure of where we are right now. You can stop sharing for a moment, and then I'll just talk about what's happened is these restaurants were taking a lot of strain, and we did see casualties. I need to say that the casualties were not quite as high as everyone anticipated. I mean, there was a time when people were talking about 25 to 50% of all restaurants having to close. It was nothing like that. Nobody has got exact numbers. But there's no doubt that we've also seen the growth of other restaurants. People have been opening, which I think is really brave and really exciting. And we've seen some new concepts come out. And to a degree, a lot of the restaurants that didn't make it were actually already in trouble before COVID. And here I can say not just restaurants, but businesses.
Yeah.
The businesses were.
I agree. I agree.
Well, I think
those
word,
businesses that were already flagging along were COVID really put them to the test, and was the factor that determined who was in and who was out, unfortunately.
Exactly. So restaurants that were strong and had good financial records and had put some money aside, they certainly didn't come out of COVID unscathed. Nobody did. Everybody in some way, either slightly higher debt or something to the landlord. So it's not like people breezed through it. But those that were in trouble before, unfortunately, were exposed, so to speak. They really were. And one word that I think really came out for me during COVID was the word relevance. That people that were not relevant in any business and any industry were the ones who took the most strain of all. And for example, even the gyms, we know that the gyms took a hell of a knock during COVID, because people suddenly discovered that they could exercise without the gym. They could go for a walk. They could buy some equipment for themselves. Now, a lot of people have gone back to the gyms, thank goodness, because I do think it's a great. I think it's a great pity that during COVID, at a time when there was indication that obesity, lack of exercise, lack of sunshine, all those things were factors in the mortality rate, we were stopped from going to the beach, stopped from walking around, and stopped from going to gym. The three things that
Yeah.
probably would have helped
Yeah.
us more than anything.
Yeah. So,
But you
yeah.
need to look
No,
at your
sorry.
business and say, am I relevant in the life of my
Yes.
customer?
Yes.
Do I actually make a difference in their life? Because if I
Exactly.
don't make a difference through providing some kind of service or some kind of experience, that's when I'm in trouble.
So what you're really talking about is this almost substitute lifestyle that people can adopt now. And people have looked at what they can substitute with traditional means, whether it's doing gym at home, whether it's taking Woolies instead of going to restaurants. So companies really need to look at how they can add value or do something different. I think you called it earlier the experience economy. So kind of what experience can they get out of using the traditional formats of creativity or recreation?
So interesting enough, two guys by the name of Pine and Gilmore actually wrote a book called The Experience Economy about 20 or 25 years ago. And it was acknowledged at the time, but has largely been ignored. And all of a sudden, we really are finding ourselves in this experience economy where people going to a restaurant want more than just the food. It's not just about the food. It's about a level of service that they receive, being made to feel welcome, being able to share an experience. I'm not sure whether I can mention brands at all. I don't want to.
Yeah, sure. If it's a good thing, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm working with a particular brand at the moment called the Clay Cafe. They're based down in Cape Town with a couple of stores in Pretoria and now in Johannesburg as well. And what happens there when you walk in is you go and select your bisque or your pottery, your piece of pottery, and you paint it at the table while you're eating your food. And it's an incredible experience for the whole family to sit there. And if you go into one of the stores, you'll seldom see a phone on the table unless someone's taking a picture of their actual piece of pottery, which is so unusual.
Right? Yeah.
And you see families interacting, and what they're doing is they're selling you the experience. It's not just the food's there. The food has to be of a high level. The service has to be of a certain level, but it's the experience. People like, for example, the Fire Room in Bedford View. I know there's one in Monte Casino. That they're selling food theater. When you go there and the guy takes the sushi and he pours or whatever it is over the sushi and they light it, that's theater and experience. So I think more and more people are going to have to look at their restaurants and say to themselves, okay, I'm fine where I am. I know where I am. I'm selling really good food at a good price. I've got a great market. The experience is good, fine. But others need to look and say, how can I increase the experience? How can I add value to my customers' lives?
Yes. And that I guess would happen. Yeah. And that I guess would happen on both the franchisor and franchisee level. The franchisor would need to kind of think of how a franchisor can reinvent themselves and how a franchisor, can reinvent themselves, as well as franchisees. What kind of local area marketing could they do to kind of get a greater spread or get the kind of target market that they're aiming for?
I think one of the really big differences during lockdown was which of the franchisees and franchisors were able to maintain a really good relationship with each other during that time.
Good point.
Because, at the best of times, Elana, the franchisee-franchisor relationship is strained. It's a strained relationship because it's a kind of grudge purchase. One of them feels they're delivering too much or receiving too little. It's often, and what COVID did was it really highlighted this gap. So what we found was some of the franchisors, and I won't mention names because I don't want anyone else to feel that they were missed out on, really stepped up for their franchisees. They cut franchise fees. They got involved in negotiations with landlords. They supported the guys all the way. They continued to talk to them on a daily basis. Others kind of took a backseat and said, hey, this is your problem, not my problem. You just need to pay me.
Yeah.
And this caused a really, really kind of big strain. So a lot of franchisees were feeling like they were not getting value from the franchisor for the money that they were giving them at that particular time. And if possible, I'd like to share my screen again with you and just tell you how I kind of see the franchisee-franchisor relationship and where it is. So In order for any really good company, and I'm talking about any company, not a franchise or whatever, you need to have an HR and a personnel department. And there are actually two different departments. HR looks at the future of the employees and who's filling out the right job, and personnel that kind of run the files, and pay slip and everything like that. There also needs to be a finance and accounting department. Finance is long-term, looks at what's happening in the future, where money should be invested, and accounting does the day-to-day books. And then, of course, there's marketing and sales, one being how do we find new customers, sales being how do we relate to the existing ones. And then there's development and production. Now, the interesting thing is that in the franchisee-franchisor relationship, those four, personnel, accounting, sales, and production, are kind of short-term. They're done on a daily basis. I don't mean there's no long-term thinking, but they're done on a daily basis, which makes them a kind of short-term thing. Whereas the others, HR, finance, marketing, development, are more on the long-term side. And what we find in a really good relationship is that the franchisor takes care of HR, finance, marketing, and development, and the franchisee takes care of personnel, accounting, sales, and production. So they have different roles in the same kind of, the franchisor needs to develop the menu, but the franchisee has to produce the food.
Yes.
The
execution.
The execution. Yeah. So that's another way of looking at it. One is planning and one is execution.
Yeah.
Now, effectively, if a franchisor is providing you with HR, finance, marketing, and development for somewhere between 7 and 12%, that's outstanding. You can't buy those skills for yourself.
Yeah.
At that number.
Absolutely.
So my feeling is, if the franchisor is doing his job and is providing those things, then he's giving great value to his franchisee, and the franchisee should have no problem paying over the money. I know there'll always be little things along the way. The problem comes in when the franchisor is taking the 7 to 12% with marketing. I'm not, some of them is 5 and 5 or 7 and 3 or whatever it is. I'm trying to be a bit broad there.
Yes.
When the franchisor is not delivering on those things, when they're collecting the money, that's when the relationship seems to be the most strained.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like everything else. The day I'd spent many years at Mug and Bean, and before that with Lingo Longa restaurants, and Ben Malto, may rest in peace. He really was my mentor. And he always used to say to us, that customers will forgive you almost anything. They'll forgive you bad service. They'll forgive you bad food. They'll even forgive you rude people. What they will never, ever forgive you is if they walk out of your establishment with a feeling that they've been ripped off. That's unforgivable. So even in the relationship between the franchisee and the franchisor, the franchisee will forgive the franchisor for a lot of little things that happen along the way, especially during pressure, whatever. But what they won't forgive them for is they feel like they're being ripped off. If they feel like they're giving money and they're not getting value.
Mm-hmm.
And it works the other way around as well, where the franchisor feels, I'm giving so much value and I can't even collect my royalties. The guy's bought himself, Ben used to refer to it as PAYE, planes, automobiles, yachts, etc. He's bought himself everything that he shouldn't, and the only person he's not paying is either the franchisor or the landlord.
Yes.
So it is. I know it's a difficult relationship, but when it works so incredibly well. It's symbiotic. They both rely on each other. That's how it should be.
Yes,
that's why.
absolutely.
I know, and this is just my personal opinion. I am very anti-fixed franchise fees. Being a number, I really am, because it takes away responsibility.
It's the antithesis of the win-win scenario. I fully agree.
If you're making more, I will earn more. If you're making less, I will earn less. And it's my job to make sure you are earning more so that I can earn more.
Yes,
so I'm very anti-fixed franchise fees on a fixed term and no kind of condition. I know things have changed a lot. The Consumer Protection Acts come in, but that's kind of where we are right now. And when I look at how people are coming out now, the really good news is I've been talking to quite a lot of franchisees and franchisors over the last couple of weeks leading up to this particular talk. And the feeling is that there really is light at the end of the tunnel. People are starting to see numbers that they haven't seen for at least 2 or 3 years. Now, it doesn't take into account that there have been increases, and of course we have gone backwards. But the fact that we're seeing numbers in 2019's numbers, and some people are seeing 2019's numbers plus an increase, it does really bode well for business in general. Unfortunately, coming with that are these increased prices, which are really, and I can't speak for all business, but I know that in restaurants particularly, they really are being squeezed between increased prices and a customer base with a decreasing spend. So you're kind of getting this thing where, what's the most you'll pay for a margarita pizza? And I reckon that number's somewhere around 95 Rand. That's kind of the most.
Right.
You're going to pay somewhere between 65 and 95 Rand. I'm just using a margarita, kind of medium to large size margarita with nice ingredients. Now, the problem is the buffalo mozzarella goes up by 10%. Flour goes up because you can't get wheat out of Ukraine by 10%. Petrol delivery goes up by another 17%. Now, all of a sudden, you need to push that price up, but you know that once you cross that 95 Rand, it just, in the customer's mind, they can't equate the pizza with that. So that's unfortunately, and I think I don't think it's just restaurants. I think it's every single business.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And there's this kind of inelastic pricing where people, in spite of the experience or whatever else they're getting from going to a restaurant or whatever it may be, there still is that price, that cap that people won't be prepared to pay more. So it really does put the franchisee in a bit of a pickle, so to speak.
No question about that, because I think about myself. Someone will phone me and say to me, let's say, for example, I'm looking for something for my bicycle. I'm looking for or even a heart rate monitor for my watch because I want to run. Now, I know that my budget's 1,000 Rand, for example. It doesn't matter what you can give me at 1,500 Rand if I haven't got it. Yeah. If you say to me, but I've got this monitor, it's actually worth 3,000, and I'll say to you, but I haven't got more than 1,000. It's not a matter of me not wanting to spend it. I simply don't have it.
Yeah.
And some of our customers, they don't have the means to spend more.
And there's the rub. I mean, Mark, that's where one needs to really, concern oneself of what type of businesses could still go beyond that, because a lot of businesses are affected by that pricing threshold.
You can switch off the sharing if you like. Sorry, thank you. So the best thing then for restaurants and businesses in general is to start looking really seriously at their costs and to start running it like a business. Now, one of the challenges is that the more successful we are, the less we pay attention to detail. So restaurants that are making a lot of money are actually leaving a lot of money on the table or out the back door because they think, well, I'm doing so well anyway. It doesn't really matter if I don't count stock every week or every day, and you tend to trust people a bit more. We need to go back to basics and really start looking at every one of those costs. Start looking at the occupation costs, which may be something you can't really change too much, but if possible, negotiate with your landlord. You need to look at your staffing costs. You can't have people standing around doing nothing. You need to kind of look at that. You need to look at your input costs. Money is earned through the front door. It's actually made at the back door. That's where you kind of, what you spend is now becoming even more important. So take the time, work with it. And here's where franchisees and franchisors really need to step up together. Because the franchisee will say, hang on, but this is the business, this is the responsibility of the franchisor. And the franchisor says, no, well, I've given you the blueprint. You don't want to put it in place. I can't walk you through. I can tell you to count stock. I can even tell you how to count stock. I can give you the systems on the till system that'll help you control it, but I can't actually count stock.
Yeah. And Mark, what you're saying is so important. I mean, it is the little things. We were doing some training the other day, and one of the franchisees from a prominent franchise said, guys, what we say to our franchisees is switch on the ovens all at the same time so you save electricity. I mean, those are just little things. That's a small thing. But if you add up all those costs.
Yeah. So there's an incredible book called Atomic Habits. The guy that
Yes,
wrote it is a guy named James Cleary. And anyone
yes.
out there who hasn't read Atomic Habits yet, trust me, go get the Audible book, get the book, and start reading Atomic Habits. And in Atomic Habits, he says that in 1 year, you can become 37.5% better by getting 1% better every day.
Sure. That's
really what it's about. How can I improve my business by 1%? So slow, steady progression is better than a big jump and then stopping forever and then trying again and going backwards. So I would really, if I owned a restaurant or any business at the moment, what I would start doing is saying, what are the things I can do that'll make a difference, a 1% difference every single day? Now, and I've even made a short little video about this, which people can find on my website. I think it's on the front page and certainly
I'll
under
put
videos.
it in the comments.
Yeah. They can go along to mikesaidwhat.co.za and look for a video. And in the video, I talk about, basically, there are 4 aspects of every business: visual, emotional, functional, and financial. That's really what they are. Visual, right. How it looks, visual, emotional, how we all relate, functional, and financial. So if you could take those 4 things and then spend a day just trying to find 3 things in each of those 4. What are 3 things I can fix visually about my restaurant right now? What are 3 things I can fix emotionally? Now, all of a sudden, you've got a list of 12 little things, and you'll spend the next 3 or 4 weeks getting those 12 things done. Once you've done that, you go back and do the next 4 or the next 6 or the next 8. And that's, if I'll never forget as an operations manager in the days when I'd visit restaurants, and you go in there with, we used to call it the QSCV, quality, service, cleanliness, and value. Everyone's got a different name for that check sheet.
Yes.
I'm not sure what other name. There's so many of the names.
KPR forms there.
Yeah, KPR forms.
Yes.
Yeah. So you walk in there with your KPR, your QSCV form, and you mark a franchisee, and you give him 75 things to do. Guaranteed, when you come back next time, all 75 haven't been done. There's no question. You really want to walk out of there and say to him, look, I'm coming back in a week's time. Here are 4 things. Here are the 4 most relevant things. I either want to see you do it, or I want to help you do it. And if you can get that incremental improvement out of your franchisees, in the long run, you're not working with 6 months from now, you're not working with the same business. But if you're expecting them to do everything within 7 days, and you write out that little warning, and you start threatening them with defranchising, that's when it doesn't happen.
Exactly. And I've seen that firsthand, Mark, as well.
We both have.
Overwhelming them with all of this detail. It just becomes too much and completely undoable, and the guys just pull away from it.
And not only that, Elana, they're fighting with a bank at the time. They're behind with the landlord. They've got problems at home. There's a million little things happening in their lives. Look at and Atomic Habits is amazing. He explains how to go about this, how to make it obvious and attractive and rewarding, and you can. I know that I've put it in practice myself, but not only in my business but in my own personal life, in getting myself fit again and getting myself healthy again, and it's been absolutely incredible. And I do believe that people can use this kind of thing to change their own business 1% at a time.
Wow. That's excellent. So Atomic Habits is really something we should get our hands on and really see how we can apply it to our lives.
And perhaps one day we can even do a talk on Atomic Habits, and I'll give you my take on, my synopsis on Atomic Habits and what are the things that really stood out for me and how they can be used in business. But
wonderful.
But I do think that there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. People are going back to eating out. Wonderful thing in South Africa is, despite today being really cold, summer's around the corner. And things happen in September and October in South Africa. It's quite weird. We take off our winter coats. We get a little bit of vitamin D. We start feeling good about ourselves. The greenery starts. it's an amazing time.
Yes,
So,
it
which
is.
also makes
It is.
we're not going into winter. We're actually, this is the time. Spend August and September working on improving your business, and reap the rewards in October, November, and December. That would kind of be my,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Your takeaway.
yeah, despite, and there's some negativity around. Besides that, there's a lot of positivity around. The guys are doing really well. They're starting to smile again. And with that, when a restaurant's doing well and the owner's making a bit more money, then he buys a new car, so the car dealership does a bit better. The car dealership guy decides to go on holiday, so the holiday does a bit better. It moves around again.
For sure. For sure. And what you're also saying, Mark, is, the principle of sharing with each other is so important. I mean, in the restaurant industry, you can see it, where they share courtyards, where they share marketing, the concept of sharing. And even on a practical level with the ops manager and the franchisee, you see sharing other franchisees, good practices, or other ideas of franchisees with other franchisees is such an important thing. And you spoke about, leaving a franchisee with 4 important things, say, to do that week. And I think maybe one of those things could be sharing success stories that have worked for other franchisees that the ops manager looks after. So there's so much positivity in the sharing and in the optimism that lies out there.
And I think that's why, for example, if you haven't had a restaurant conference, if you haven't had a franchise conference for a few years, it's time to have one again. It's time to step up and say, look, we've got ourselves a speaker. We've got ourselves someone to talk about best practices. We've got a really nice thing at a franchise thing is to invite 4 franchisees to sit and answer questions themselves.
Lovely, lovely.
So what you do is you pick the 4 franchisees who are especially good in particular areas. Someone who's very good at finance, someone's very good at staff, someone who's very good at local area marketing, someone's very good at operations. And you'd have those 4 people sit up there and field questions from the other franchisees.
Yes.
And kind of share. So I think that time is also on us now. It's time to
time, and it's good timing now towards the end of the year. It's a lovely time to
perfect time. And even if you do the first one online, because a lot of people haven't got the money for travel, so do it online. It'll cost you a fraction of holding a conference, and you could still get the same results if you do it properly. I mean, look at the 2 of us chatting here on SteamYard. Set up SteamYard, a couple of speakers, a couple of breakaway rooms. You could almost run the entire conference.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it won't cost a lot, and will just bring a lot of value and a lot of reassurance and encouragement to franchisees out there. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah. So I think that's on its way. And as I say, I'm increasingly positive. Maybe I'm not quite as positive as before COVID came along, because it rattled all of us in some particular way. But I'm increasingly positive. I'm seeing that from restaurant owners. I'm seeing it from business owners. I know there's still people struggling. Please, not for 1 second am I trying to discount, what we're getting through. But at least we're seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, and let's run with that.
For sure. And especially in franchising, I do think that because you've got your franchisor supporting you, and hopefully franchisees that support the franchising concept, you definitely are one step ahead of those who are owning their own businesses on their own. So franchising is that advantage of having that support. And like you say, it's the relationship that is so key, and also the communication in that relationship, to communicate, and the franchisees kind of need to feel they're not alone, that there is somebody out there visiting them, supporting them, giving them input, holding their hand. And that really is the beauty of the franchising relationship.
And to bring positivity with it.
Yes,
I know, not for 1 second am I saying that franchisees should be allowed to get away with stuff. That's not what I'm implying. And of course, there are some things which are more critical than others. So, for example, safety issues should never, ever be overlooked. But this is the time to send your field consultants out there with a positive message and assistance. They shouldn't be walking in there and just telling them what they're doing wrong. They need to say to them, listen, I noticed we've got this issue with this. Here's a solution. I'll be back this week. I'll help you implement it. And if they ignore you, of course, that's a completely different story. But it's that time.
Yes, 100%. And I think field service consultants also need support to be able to be motivated. And going back to what you mentioned earlier, the training, training of franchising staff, training of franchisees, training of staff. When things go bad, people tend to push aside marketing budget, training budget. They think that things will just kind of run on their own volition, but it doesn't happen that way. You kind of need to invest with the fruits.
A funny story, many, many years ago, I was chatting with Ben, and I said to him, when I walk into a restaurant, I know the waiter is going to treat me exactly the way the assistant manager treats him. I know the assistant manager is going to treat the waiter exactly the way the manager treats him. I know the manager is only going to treat people as well as the owner treats him. The owner is only going to treat him as well as the field consultant treats him. The field consultant only as long as the regional manager, all the way up to Ben himself. So I would say to him, basically, Ben, when I get lousy service at a table in a restaurant, it's actually your fault.
I love that butterfly effect.
Yeah, because it really does. It has this. It really does have this butterfly effect. Even the franchisors right now need to go away and say, what example am I setting for my franchisees? Am I really delivering all those things as well as I could at the moment under the current conditions? So a lot of them are now a little bit understaffed, haven't been able to travel as much. And I completely sympathize and identify with all of that. But if the franchisor could also say to himself, okay, what are the 4 things that I could do a little bit better?
Yes,
it will have a massive effect on the franchisee and on the brand.
Exactly. And like you're saying, if a franchisor or the CEO could think to himself or herself, how would I like a waiter to talk to my customers? That is how I should be talking to and generating enthusiasm amongst my staff complement.
Yeah.
Okay, super. Phew, Mike, wow. Thank you so much for all that.
Pleasure.
That depth and breadth of content. So appreciated. Is there anything you'd like to close with, Mike?
No, I think if you don't mind just sharing the screen, there are my contact details if anyone would like to get hold of me. And when you're looking for a speaker at your next conference, give me a shout. I promise you your franchisees won't walk out feeling the same way as when they walked in. I think be positive. Things are improving every single day. Take some time to each one of you, franchisees, franchisors, take some time to look after yourself as well.
Good point.
Look at your own health.
Look at your health
on a physical and mental. Make time for yourself. Go for walks. Look at your eating, because you yourself need to be in a certain condition in order to run your business.
To others, yes.
Yeah, and don't overlook it as well. And spend time with your families. We
super.
Yeah. But thank you so much for the opportunity, Elana. I really appreciate it.
And it will be recorded. I know a lot of people don't have time to watch live, so it will be recorded and questions can be posted and we can deal with them as they come in. And we're very happy to answer those questions and share our thoughts with you.
Elana, thank you again. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mark. Much appreciated.
Okay.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.